AI is the meta theme, the meta wave that's changing everything that we do. You need 3 Ds to dominate in an AI first world. You need data, distribution, most importantly, you need. I'll tell you a crazy stat. Apart from NVIDIA and OpenAI, one of the companies that made the most money from AI is Accenture. No, now we look back and we say, hey, the lamplighters transformed to software engineers. That was over a 100-year period. One has to be all 3 things. You have to be ready for the fact that AI is going to change every job.
Ryan Valles is the successful founder of Interview Kickstart that helps software engineers nail tough technical interviews at Google, Facebook, Amazon, among others. Apart from that, he was also an entrepreneur in residence at Accel Partners.
Your manager can't promote you and nobody else can promote you. Only you can promote yourself. You give yourself a case study of what you want to deliver over the next 6 months. If you deliver it, you get promoted automatically. What are some of the things that I'd flip my thinking on? Is that businesses that scale are at extremes. You have to take one extreme and...
What trends or opportunities are you most excited about, and how do you see them being the future of your industry? Hello, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde Podcast, where we dive into the art and science of strategy, execution, and leadership. I'm your host, Priyanka Shinde, author of The Art of Strategic Execution and a consultant for tech leaders. In this podcast, I bring you candid conversations with top executives, startup founders, and industry experts who are driving innovation, delivering results, and staying ahead in today's competitive landscape. We will break down what it takes to tap into founder mode and turn vision into action. If you are serious about elevating your leadership and execution skills, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. It helps the podcast and ensures you never miss an episode. I'm really excited for today's guest, Ryan Valles. He is the founder and CEO of Interview Kickstart, the largest US-focused platform for software and advanced artificial intelligence training, with an alumni of over 25,000 software engineers and over 700 instructors from the top tech companies. Before founding Interview Kickstart, Ryan was at Accel Partners, where he was working with some of India's largest consumer internet companies. He has also served as the CEO of a large e-commerce company, and his early life was in consulting and private equity across the US, UK, South Africa, Australia, and India, a truly global entrepreneur. Ryan is an enthusiastic sportsman and plays anything that involves chasing a ball. He also plays the guitar. Yeah, he also plays the guitar and the piano. Welcome to the show, Ryan. Really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Priyanka. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for the kind introduction. Excited for today's session.
Yeah, me too. So I would just, like to kick off with a little bit introduction from yourself. Like, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what do you do currently?
So, as you said, I am a co-founder with my co-founder Soham. We run Interview Kickstart, and that is really, the central thesis of Interview Kickstart is something that both of us kind of came to independently. I think it's a very powerful thesis that's going to play out over many, many years. And that thesis is that in a tech-first world, right, in an emerging tech-first world, companies are the new universities, right? And the thought process was the way tech is evolving. Cutting edge tech today is no longer a bastion of universities, which is what it was like 50 years ago or 20 years ago. But in an internet era, right, and much more so in an AI era, cutting edge tech emanates from the world's best companies, right? And so our thought process was, hey, there needs to be a way that people who are not at those companies learn those advanced tech skills and are able to make the leap to these, world-beating top tech companies, let's say the top 50, 100 companies, because one can have an incredibly transformative life as a result of making that one change. And this is not accessible to people outside tech. And so we saw this as a gap in the market. We started small. Our first cohort was 6 people. Second cohort was, I think, 8 people. And then we went on from there. and now we teach about 5 to 6,000 people a year, 25,000 people overall. And we built this, I think, really interesting platform of engineers, PMs, TPMs, hiring managers, technical recruiters from the world's best companies who help you bridge skills required to get to those companies. So that's kind of what I do. I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I think this is something that we build this business on this very powerful insight, right? And that insight continues to hold true today, and probably in an AI first world, more and more in the years to come, hopefully.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like Interview Kickstart was the leader in really kicking this off the ground. I mean, there's so many companies that are now coming that do something similar like you do. But Interview Kickstart started what, 2016, 2017? Is that right?
No, even before that. We started in 2014.
Wow.
So we're doing this for 10 years. And obviously, we have evolved very significantly over that period of time. In fact, now about half the business is advanced software training across all the traditional domains in software. And the other half of the business is now advanced AI, right? So just purely AI in different offerings. And we can talk about it in more detail, but broadly that's how the business is written. Yeah, so we got in early and we've been building since then.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How did you come about to, like, I know you talked about like you and Soham do this. How did you, like, what led you to founding this company and working on Interview Kickstart?
So the founding story is interesting. So Soham actually founded Interview Kickstart by himself. I came on board a few years later when we were thinking about growing, and then we obviously redefined the business, and now it's much more a platform, versus anything else. But both of us essentially saw the same challenge, and let's start with Soham. Soham spent many years at Box, right? And he was, if I'm not mistaken, engineer number 5, employee number 15 at Box, amongst the first directors of engineering. And he stayed with Box all the way till the IPO. And while he was at Box, he spent a significant amount of his time building the tech team, and as a result, the interview process at Box. And he kept seeing that very good people would come into the interview process, but they would just not have the skill sets, right? They would not have the technical proficiency to be able to make it to top companies. And at that point of time, Som and I were talking about doing something together. I was coming at it from a very different perspective, right? When I was running an e-commerce company, and then when I was at Accel, I saw that most companies were struggling for good tech talent across the board, large companies, small companies, startups. And all of them would say the same thing, that we get a lot of people, but we don't get enough of quality talent, right? And when Som and I talked about it, we realized that, hey, this is really something that it's missing. There is a missing bridge. And Soham started. I was helping him as an advisor for the first couple of years. And then post Accel, when I was thinking of going on to do something and building something of my own, Soham and I connected, and he said, hey, you know what, you've been helping me. I think there's something really interesting here. You completely understand the space. Why don't you come on, and why don't we do some, scale this together? And we thought about it. And as I thought about it, I realized that, wow, there is really a big opportunity. And we kind of crystallized what we were really doing maybe a couple of years after that, which is when we realized that, hey, we've put all of these building blocks into place. And really what we built is we built this company first learning platform. And the name Interview Kickstart was already up and running by then. And so we've continued to keep the name, but the name is a bit of a misnomer now. It represents a small part of the business. Really what we got together to build is to build this platform, which is company first learning, right? Very practical company first learning on cutting edge tech. And so kind of that's how we got together. And I have to say, Priyanka, everything that I traditionally thought about building a business and business completely was in many ways flipped on its head, after I came to Interview Kickstart and after we build this together. In all humility, I don't think either of us thought we would be able to get to the scale that we have, and the scale that we see possible when we first started doing this.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think there's this I mean, universities teach you a lot. And I've come to realize the same thing as you were saying is there isn't like that company first approach. What will help, what skills and what can you learn that will actually help you when you go on the job? Um, like universities are great at giving you the foundation, but I believe what you're doing is really helping kind of, here's the focused way of thinking about how you can succeed at a company. And that's really, I mean, it's so helpful for somebody to think from that perspective. And I'm
Yeah, and
sure
I
like,
think that. Sorry, go ahead, please complete.
no, I was just going to say, I'm sure that there, like you were saying, you had to like what you thought about business, you had to flip that around. And so, like, I was going to ask you, like, what were some of the most challenging and some of the most rewarding moments through the last few years of scaling Interview Kickstart?
Yeah, sorry, before I come to that, what I was going to say early on is there is a place for universities, right? But universities came up around the industrial revolution, right? That's when they really started scaling. And I mean, they existed even before that, the Cambridges and the Oxfords of the world. But the reason why, so universities definitely have a place, but the reason why universities struggle, in particular when it comes to tech, is the half life of a lot of tech is a year, less than a year. I mean, look at AI. Every couple of quarters, there's a new GPT, or there's a new Claude, or there's a new Gemini,
Yeah.
and so universities are not built. They're not designed to keep up with that pace of change, which is why there is a place for universities. But if you want, especially in tech, if you want to keep up with the latest and the greatest changes that are abound, it is very difficult to do so
Mm-hmm.
in universities, and that's kind of why we exist. But to get to your point, well, what are some of the most rewarding moments and the most challenging moments? I think usually they all center around the customer, right? The most rewarding moments and the most challenging moments, they always center around your customers. Obviously there are other challenges, but let's start with the most rewarding moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think personally for me, when you see people who come through what you are offering and they fundamentally transform, that is always the most rewarding, right? Let me give you a specific example of what this looks like. What's the human story behind this? And I'll give you two examples. One of our students, right, he had failed 13 interviews. He had applied everywhere: Amazon, Google, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, LinkedIn, all of this. And he had kind of thought to himself that he's never going to make it. Obviously failed 13 times, right? A friend of his recommended him the Interview Kickstart program. And that is how we get most people. Most people come through us through some sort of word of mouth recommendation. That's how we know the business has legs, right? When people recommend that, otherwise acquisition costs are too much. He came to the program, very committed, finished the program, did the classes, mock interviews, then decided that he's going to interview. The first company he interviewed at was Amazon in AWS, which is one of the companies he had failed earlier. And in his first interview, he sailed through, doubled his comp. Right? Now, that is something that really makes you, gives you a nice warm, fuzzy feeling, because you realize you've fundamentally transformed that person. And by virtue of that, Priyanka, what we've noticed is when a person fundamentally, and I'm sure, you with your experience at Meta would know, these companies, they transform your life. They pay much more, your compensation is much more, and you get to do cutting edge work. And so if you have a family, right, you like, what do you do with that increment in compensation? You go to a better house, you give your kids a better education, maybe you travel. So, it's multi-generational, right? The impact is multi-generational. And you become an example for your kids that, hey, my mom or my dad is somebody who's doing really well, and you kind of become a role model. So clearly, I think all, the greatest moments around company building for me are around customer transformation, right? That is when you see the fruit of your labor, and especially when people write to you and they tell you their story, right? The second example I want to give you is what something that is very close to me. There is one of our learners. she struggled massively with interview anxiety. Smart, very smart, very capable. But she just fundamentally struggled with interview anxiety, right? Now, interviews are a very challenging construct because they're completely atypical from what you do in your day job. They're like pressure cooker situations, right? And especially in tech where the size of the prize is so high. And so interview anxiety is, quite common. Now, in her case, because of the interview anxiety, she didn't interview anywhere. She said, I'm just not going to put myself into this position. And so the first job she got, she just continued to prod and move forward. And then again, through a recommendation, somebody told her, hey, you know what, you should give this a shot. She came, she did the program, again, very committed, followed the pathway that we laid, finished the program, applied. She had a couple of interviews where it didn't go well, but she kept working with the coaches. Eventually, she got an engineering manager role at one of the FANG companies, right? And when you talk to her, her feedback is very interesting. She says, yes, I got a much better role, better comp, all of that was great. But she said, this process has fundamentally transformed me as a human being. I no longer get anxiety because I know that if I put in the work, I can overcome anxiety as I did in the interview process. So clearly customers and stuff that is around customers is ultimately what drives you. And there also lie the challenges, right? Now, when you scale, one of the things you have to do as a business owner is you have to put in place processes, right? And invariably what happens, Priyanka, is every time you hit the next degree of scale, some process breaks, right? And so there's going to be some customer complaint or the other that you have to deal with. And let me tell you a funny incident, right? Just to show you that you cannot predict where irate customers are going to come from. Now, this is before we scaled and did this remotely. We used to have in-person sessions in Sunnyvale, right? And I get this email one day from a really irate customer. And the customer says, Ryan, I'm really upset with a change that you guys have made. I think this is fundamentally unacceptable. He doesn't tell me what the change is. And so I want to meet you after tonight's class and have a chat. But, this guy sounds really, upset, wondering what's going on. So we change curriculum, we change instructors. All the class ratings are amazing. I had a very important event that evening, which I canceled because I was like, okay, I want to go and try and understand what's troubling this customer. And I get there, and I kid you not, his complaint was, over the last 2 weeks, when you served dinner to us, which is something that we used to do just to keep people engaged, you have stopped serving butter. And that was the complaint.
Wow.
So the truth is, it really does matter which side you butter your bread, right? And that was a complaint. And the reason I picked a very flippant complaint is, when you scale, you never know where the customer challenges are going to come. It could come from something as inconsequential as, hey, you didn't give me butter. Now, the customer at that point is not thinking that I have not paid for dinner. Dinner is something that we provide because we didn't want people to get distracted. We didn't want people to leave and come back and miss. And so we said, let's do this. But the fact that we didn't give dinner the fact that we provided dinner was not appreciated. The fact that we didn't give butter was caught, right? And therein lies the challenges, right? But so you have to be willing to take the good with the bad, explain, talk to him. And that story I always remember because eventually he became one of our strongest supporters because I spent time, I heard his feedback and I said, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize it meant such a big thing. We will figure this out. And I quickly left, went to a grocery store, bought butter, came back and said, dude, here's some butter. And here's some butter for you to take home, right, for fun. And he appreciated the humor. In fact, what I did was I bought salted, unsalted, and semi-salted butter. I said, pick your butter. And so, you invariably the challenges come around customers when you scale, especially in a service-oriented business. And the joys also come from there.
Yeah, makes sense. You literally buttered the customer here.
Yeah, I mean, I I was salty, semi-salty, and not salty.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
it worked. So you have to do all of these
it's
things.
it's an incredible story. It does tell you, right? And you're so right. Like when you see the transformation, when you see somebody who you're working with achieve their goals, and yes, like there is like such a domino effect of like them getting a job in a FANG company, for example, that like there's that sense of pride that comes in, or just like you said, the warm fuzzy feeling. And I've seen that, like even in some of the work I do with coaching, like coaching and getting and
Yeah.
like seeing that light bulb go off or that like shift happen, those are one of the most rewarding moments for me as well. And at the same time, like working with personalities, when you work with customers directly, everybody is so different, and you have to like take that and figure out how to work with it, which is also what makes me very like just this whole aspect of tech and people. There's like just such a juxtaposition of like people and tech. It's so interesting to me, and I think that's what you are highlighting.
And the thing is, everybody has their own human story, Priyanka. When we were a smaller firm, we're fully self-funded, right? We were self-funded till we got to massive scale, so we couldn't afford to hire people, right? So for many years, I was the sales department and the marketing department, like just me, and Soham was the delivery and ops department, right? So in that process, I would do one-on-one customer, sales calls every day. So I would start early in the morning and go till midday, and then I would do it in the evening again. So I would do about 6 to 7 calls a day, and I did this for 2 years. So I have personally spoken one-on-one to about 3,500 customers to talk to them about interview kicks. And then I started doing webinars where I would speak to 100 people at a time. So I've probably spoken to about 20, 25,000, maybe 30,000 people, right? When I used to do these one-on-one calls, I realized that invariably everybody had their own unique story and their own unique challenge, right? Like you were talking about from a coaching perspective. And, something specific needed to be unlocked. And most people have really good intent, but you're so right? The human stories are often forgotten behind all the, tech, which is an enabler. I think the other really challenging part about growing a business is people. You have to get really, hiring really good people is absolutely critical. I often tell friends that when I've not written a book like you have, but at some point I hope to write a book. One of the chapters is going to be craziest places where I have hired and interviewed people. I'll tell you two interesting stories,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe three interesting stories, right? Just to illustrate how challenging and how out of the box you have to think. The shortest time I have taken to interview and recruit somebody, it's a true story, is while crossing a road waiting at a red light. I was waiting at a red light. I saw somebody who I knew for many years ago. We were looking for a content writer. I said, "Hey, what's up? How are you?" Her name was Arvinda. And I said, "Arvinda, how are you? What have you been up to?" She said, "Oh, I continue to work on content, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Oh, are you looking to do something interesting?" She said, "Yeah, Ryan, I've been thinking about doing something interesting. I've just been sitting in it for a while." She said, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I run this company called Interview Kickstart, blah, blah, blah." At that point in time, the light turned green. And I'm not exaggerating. It's a true story. While crossing the zebra crossing, I said, "Why don't you come and do something with us?" She said, "That sounds like a really good idea." I said, "Cool." She said, "I can do this soon." I said, "Great, let's start now. Our office is 5 minutes from here. Let's walk to the office and get started." And she agreed, right? Uh, the other couple of crazy examples that I have is I was recently flying through Dubai for work, and there was a marketing person that I wanted to interview, and really good guy, and I didn't want to lose out on the interview, and so I said, "Hey, listen, we got connected that day, and I said, you know what, I'm flying through Dubai this evening. I'll be there at 1 a.m. I have a flight at 6:30 a.m. Do you mind coming to the airport?" Right? He came to the airport. We spoke, and he now works with us,
Mm.
right?
In the middle
And
of the
he
night.
quit. Yeah, he quit his startup. He quit his job, and he said, "I'm going to come and do this." So I think hiring good talent is something that you have to do whatever it takes to bring good good people on. Ashwin, for example, when every month when Ashwin and I were friends, just for some context, Ashwin is a common friend, Priyanka and mine. When I was at Accel, Ashwin used to work at another startup, and we used to go and have tea together. And I would tell Ashwin, quit what you're doing and come and work with me, right? And he would say, yeah, whatever. And I did this every quarter for 4 years. And then one quarter, when I was in San Francisco, I messaged Ashwin and said, Ashwin, you should just come and work with me at Interview Kickstart. You were born to do something together with me. Why are you wasting your time? And he said, let's do it. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, I'm open to it. I said, hold on a second. I called Soham. I said, you talk to Ashwin right now, and let's close this by the end of the day. And that's what we did. And Ashwin worked with us for 4 years, right? So I think the other side of having the highs and the challenges is all around bringing on board great people and what you need to do to bring on board great people.
Yeah. Oh
Because
my God.
people build the company. People build the company.
So true, so true. And I'm so amazed at, like, obviously the examples are amazing, but just your determination to go out there and look for these people or be involved personally. And I feel like, when they talk about, and I was going to touch upon this whole founder mode thing that's going viral, but this is what it is like, from talking to one-on-one to customers, to maybe getting them butter, to going and having a conversation at, like, in the middle of the night, to hire the people. I mean, that is what, as a founder, you're trying to really do anything and everything to build your company. And it really goes to show, like, how much you can be involved. I mean, it's what you put in is what you're going to get out when you see the company grow.
My and this is not just me, right? You look at my co-founder. I mean, I think the two things I have done incredibly smartly in my life is marry an incredible wife and partner with an incredible co-founder, both who are super brilliant. So I don't have to do much work. Great people around you. My job is to get to these great people. But even Soham, I mean, when 2014 to 2017 and when I came on board, man, the guy did everything. He would talk to customers in the morning and deliver to customers in the evening. Like, I used to write on Quora. Like, the guy is he's a machine, and you really do everything. And, like, I'm sure Sandeep and Ashwin, and you yourself, I'm sure realize that you got to do all of these things. I think so. Yeah, I've been looking at this whole founder mode thing. Right? It's like it's great marketing spiel, and it has been going viral. I think the key thing that I have seen in very successful founders, Priyanka, is they get it to done. They own the outcome. And so ownership we have two values at IK. In fact, there's a funny story there. Sam and I were thinking about what values do we have for the company, and we said, let's have two values, and I'll be a little bit politically correct here. The original two values were be an owner, don't be a dash, right? And then somebody said, hey, this don't be a dash, you can't write publicly. And so we removed don't be that the dash starts with A and ends with an E. Okay. Yeah. So we said, be an owner, don't be a dash, because we wanted people that were super driven, but we wanted a great culture, right? And we effectively removed that, and then we said, don't be a jerk. And then that became part of the culture. And so we eventually have two values: be an owner, be frugal. And, I think founders are all about getting things done, and you have to do all of this. You have to give the example, blah, blah, blah. But I think, what people miss in this founder mode, I think it's a little bit self-praising, right? It's a little bit of saying that the founder is the be all and end all. And yeah, sure. But the truth is, at least the way we think, is how do you institutionalize that in your company? Because you can't be buttering everybody's bread, right? And so, as an example, I'll give you an example of something that we did. And so, therefore, I think that founder mode is, yes, it's great, but I think there's a much more important term. we wanted to drive ownership and the ability to act throughout the company without being directed, right? So we kept thinking about how do we drive ownership? How do we kind of give the message that you are really an owner versus just doing lip service? I think one of the interesting things we've done, Priyanka, is in the promotion process. Your manager can't promote you and nobody else can promote you. Only you can promote yourself. So the way the promotion process works is you put yourself up for promotion, you give yourself a case study of what you want to deliver over the next 6 months. You write that out. You tell us what you're going to deliver. You say, I'm putting myself up for promotion. If you deliver it over the 6 months, you get promoted automatically. And that's how we drive ownership right down to every individual level. Because the point is, you own your career.
Right.
We don't own your career. Your manager doesn't own your career. You own your career. And that's how you build ownership, right? So I think while founder mode is important, let's not overstate the role that the founder plays, right? The founder can direct, do a lot of things, but the founder without a team is useless, right? And so I think founder mode is important. You have to do everything, but it's far more important to enable your team to do everything, and let them drive. So that's kind of how we have thought about, the business.
Yeah. That's really interesting to hear from you, considering like, yes, you did everything yourself earlier. And then as the company was scaling, is like, how do we instill that culture? And I believe it's a
Yeah,
lot about like that. How do you instill this founder mode culture, if you want to use that term, into
yeah,
everybody we hire? Because you can't be present everywhere. And like that story of like, how do you empower the people to take ownership of their career or maybe the work they do? Because that's something I also like tell people is nobody is going to care about your career, for example, more than you. Your manager
correct.
is there to sort of maybe coach you or guide you, but it's you. And if somebody cannot look after their career, then what does that mean in terms of working on a product of by a company? So I like the
Yeah,
empowerment aspect.
and we tell people that you are the founder of your role. I happen to be the founder of the company. That's fine. But you are the founder of your role, right? So Priyanka as a TPM is the founder of the Priyanka TPM role. So you have full authority to act within that capacity and more, right? And that goes all the way up and all the way down, right? The 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 heads of each of our departments, we tell them you are the founder of your department. You're not the business head. You are the founder of your department, right? And we tell everybody in the company there's no hierarchy. The distance between any two people in a company is a Discord message. That's it, right? And so that's how we have kind of worked hard to drive this. I think you said it very, very well. The founder mentality. Everybody's a founder. You are an owner. You drive to get things done.
Yeah.
And when you repeat and these things are not easy, but when you repeat and repeat and repeat, then the team starts perpetuating the culture, right? They are the ones who's like, hey, hold on a second, you're not acting like a founder.
Yeah.
In IK, we all act like founders, right? And so, in fact, the we've our retention is super high. People don't leave. But the few people who have left at the leadership level, all have spent more than 4 years with us. All the people who have left, the 3 or 4 who have left over the 10 years that we've had, all of them have gone off to start their own company. Nobody's left to join another company, right? And so that makes you also feel proud. You have kind of, they're inspired to go and be founders themselves.
Right. Yeah. Activating founder mode and like everybody. I mean, that's
Yeah,
very
exactly. That's a very good way to put it. Activating founder mode in everybody. That's a fun thing to do.
Yeah. And I believe that also helps you just scale. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you is, I mean, what has been key to scaling Interview Kickstart from something that say Soham was doing between 2014 and 2017 through also, I think one of your best scaling periods was, I assume, through COVID years. And like this is a very competitive education tech space. So what
Yeah.
are some of like the key factors that helped you scale to where you are today?
Blood, sweat, tears, and a hell of a lot of luck, right? And one should definitely, be humble and real to say that there are many good companies, and luck does play a very important role, Priyanka, right? But you have to be ready to take advantage of that luck, right? My wife keeps telling me I need to get a tattoo that says I am lucky, and it's true. I do believe I am very, very, very lucky. Something that I've done, maybe in my past life, I'm not so sure what this has gotten me to be very, very lucky. And I think we took advantage of some of the lucky things that came our way, and there are some things that we did very determinedly, right? So, I think two or three key things, and I'll come to the COVID question in a second. I think I'm just trying to think. It's such a great question. What fund? I mean, I can think of many examples of things that we did to help us scale, but I'm trying to think what would be the thread across everything. Maybe the top two, three things that we did. So I think one is listening to the customer, right? And you have to know when to listen and when not to listen to the customer. Okay, and I'll give you an example of how each of these played out. The first example is going to sound really funny, but those are the best examples, right? In 2022, the end of 2022, I remember Soham and I talking. We were talking to one of our team leaders, Ashwin, bunch of folks, and in that conversation, we were saying, "Hey, when we are talking, we have this wonderful network, right, of 25,000 alums and 700 instructors. And so we sit at the intersection of some very interesting information currents across companies, customers, and coaches, right? Let's say 3 Cs. And one of the things we kept hearing is this term machine learning and AI. Now, obviously, we had an AI ML offering on the interview prep side, all of that good stuff. But we had heard this term a lot. And so in one of those conversations, Soham and I were talking, and I don't remember which one of us said that I think there's something going to happen in AI. Let's spin out machine learning into a separate offering. Okay, let's do this, and let's go and reach out to new customers. Now, I'm going to tell you how we also get lucky, right? But how you have to be the right place at the right time. And within that month, GPT came out. Within that, November 2023. Right. 2020, was it 20? Yeah, sorry, 22.
Right. November 22.
22. Right? November 20, within that month of having this discussion saying we should do something in AI and ML as a separate opportunity, boom, GPT comes out, right? Our initial hypothesis was we'll go and do this for new folks as a separate offering. And what can we bring? We bring FANG and top company oriented AI, which is cutting edge, right? Nobody else had that. We went to the market. We said we're going to bring on new customers, but let's try this with our alumni first. It went like wildfire. The alumni was so committed. They trusted us. They were so committed to doing this, Priyanka. We had no space for new people for months and months and months. Now, tactically, that makes even better business sense because you are getting alumni without acquisition cost, right? So you can charge them much less. And that became a nice virtuous cycle, right? Now, if you think about that example, we had built the community, we had built the instructors, we sat on top of these, this information currents. All of that we had worked hard to build.
Right.
We built the insight. Mm-hmm. We said we should do something in AI, but we couldn't have time GPT. right?
That's true.
But when GPT came out, we just doubled down on it, right? And so fundamentally, I think the first thing in terms of scaling is you have to have a combination of luck and being ready to seize that luck when the moment arises. You cannot dismiss luck, but you also cannot dismiss the ability to seize that luck, right? As the saying goes, the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? When I was at Accel, I learned one very interesting thing at Accel. They have this concept called the prepared mind. They say that you make good venture investments when you have a prepared mind. That's how they invested in Facebook. They had the prepared mind to say social networking is a big thing, right? So we had the prepared mind to seize on the AI opportunity because we were very close to the customer, right? We are close to customer insights. We are close to our instructors and coaches. And so I think if you have to scale something, you have to be very close to the customer. That is the first and foremost thing. The second thing is that when you want to scale, you cannot be average. You cannot take a middle of the road positioning, right? As the saying goes, if you have your head in the freezer and your feet in a furnace, on average you are at room temperature, right? And that is true, even more true in business. And you asked me this question earlier, I didn't answer. What are some of the things that I'd flip my thinking on? One of the things that I didn't realize till I worked at Interview Kickstart and so on, and I was scaling it, is that businesses that scale are at extremes. You have to take one extreme, and ideally you want to counter position everybody else, right? And so I think that was the second insight to scale. We took an extreme. We said we're going to go after advanced tech with working engineers, working TPMs, working PMs. We will build our entire offering around the working engineer. We will have FANG folks teaching them. We will do it live. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, you are an ex-TPM. It's incredibly difficult to teach experienced engineers and TPM. I mean, they are the hardest people to deal with because they're super smart, right? And so the bar and the ask is so high. So we built our entire system to teach that extreme, very experienced working professionals who want to move to a far better company. Most people hadn't even thought of that as a market. Everybody went after college kids and 1 or 2 year experienced folks, right? So I think the second insight is when you build something, go for the extreme. And you look at all top companies. You look at Apple, extreme design, extremely connected ecosystem, right? Closed ecosystem. Then they went, that's the first thing that Apple did. The second thing that Apple did is they said privacy is iPhone, right? Extreme, closed privacy, right? You look at Android, they went exactly the other way around. Super open, right? That's how they build, right? SpaceX, the guy said, I'm going to send a rocket up and bring it back. Extreme, right? So companies that scale, especially getting off the ground in the early days, then obviously, competition, you have to keep out executing. They typically take an extreme positioning, counter position everybody else, right? So, that would be the second. Be close to the customer, take a counter position. And the third, you have to find a way to scale your people. And that is probably very, very hard. It's really hard to get good people, but we have taken a lot of counterintuitive bets there. So when we wanted to hire people after Soham and I, and we were two co-founders doing everything, we didn't hire junior people. We hired people who would be department heads. We said, hey, you are going to come in as head of engineering. You are going to be the department head. You're going to come in as head of sales. We hired senior people, but we said, you're going to work very hands-on to start. All of us are in the P2P business. P2P. P2P stood for peon to president. We are going to do everything. And we kind of built that, and that DNA continued. So I would say these are the three things. Be close to your customer, take an extreme position, get great people, and have the balance of thinking what is the next logical step, and also how can this scale. Next logical step, scale, right? And there are obviously a bunch of other things, but I would say in our case, these are the three top things that I can think of. Very good question. I've never really introspected on that question and said, what are some of the themes that, if I were to kind of thread out, what would be the top 2, 3, and these would be the top 2, 3.
Got it. I mean, those are very much like practical things that if you're like, if for folks who are listening and thinking about scaling their startups, their businesses, it provides them with like, here's how it's almost like a blueprint. And I love the prepared mind. And even though you say the lucky aspect, I don't think, like you said, the hard work is needed. So even if ChatGPT came out and you couldn't um, time that, one is you all were ready, but the second is there is hard work and there's talent maybe. And I always think like those three things are like a triangle where you need at least two. You cannot just survive on luck or just survive on hard work or talent.
And you have to double. The key is to double down. See, you can't predict when you're going to get lucky.
Right.
If you work hard and you are smart, you will find yourselves in positions where serendipity offers you opportunities for luck. But you have to, when you find yourself getting lucky, the key, and it's true in investing as well, right? Then you keep doubling down. And that is where you have to place the bets. You have to think in bets. But when you think in bets, the bet at which you start seeing yourself getting lucky, then you just go all in, right? And that's what we have done consistently. Like wherever we saw stuff working, we were, I'm not sure smart's the right word, but we were aware enough, right? Smartness is, is very, it lies in the eye of the beholder, right? But we were aware enough to say, hey, something is working here. It's very, 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 very difficult to make stuff work in business. When it is working, you just thank your lucky stars, you thank your gods, and you double down. And I think that's very, very important. Knowing where and when to double down.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such an important thing for any founder, anybody who's running a business or running even a team, for example. But I think it also speaks to your ability to have hired those people who could, just own things, which then gave you the ability to say, okay, what is coming down the line? Let me look ahead. Like, let me, these folks are taking care of what's happening now. And we will come together and we will discuss, what do we need to be ready for? So I feel like it kind of leads into like all the 3 points you made are so much interconnected.
They are very, very connected.
Yeah. And I think without one of those, maybe, like the scale wouldn't have been the same. I don't know, but I would
agreed.
think.
I absolutely agree. Without even one of those, it would not have been the same.
Yeah. So when you think of, I know we talk about the scaling that has happened at Interview Kickstart, and of course there's a huge number of alumni you have, and you could measure success for Interview Kickstart based on even just those numbers. But what do you all measure? How do you all measure the success of Interview Kickstarts? Like, what metrics matter most to you?
I mean, see, there are. I would say there are 3 dimensions of this, right? The primary is obviously customer, because customer drives everything else, right? So it starts with customer. The second is obviously business metrics, right? That matter. So customer impact, what are we doing? Like the why do we exist? Second is business, right? And third, to some degree, is potentially investor oriented, right? In our case, we have a exceptionally supportive investor that we raised capital from, and so we don't have to really worry about all of that, right? They're very supportive of what we're doing. They understand the business. They trust us. So in our case, the first 2, but in very many cases, you have to manage investors or a set of investors and the investor asks and investor metrics, which can be very challenging. I've been in that position before, when I was running the e-commerce company, where just managing a board is a full-time job. So those are the 3. In our case, we have a super supportive investor, incredible set of guys, So we don't have to worry about that, right? There's no overhead. So let's talk about the first two. Customers, obviously important, right? On the customer side, we look at how many customers are we enrolling? What is the how do they rate our delivery? And there we look at what's called CSAT and NPS. If I'm not mistaken, I think we have the highest CSAT and NPS in the ecosystem. Our CSAT is like 98, 99%, and our NPS in almost every case is above 65, right? Harvard is probably less than that, right? So it's really, really, special. That's important because that talks to the offering, that talks to the product that we are offering to customers, right? So enrollments, delivery metrics. Those are the customer metrics, super important. Then there's the business metrics, right? Business metrics are revenue, profitability, and if you want to get more sophisticated, there's like gross margin, contribution margin 1, contribution margin 2, contribution margin 3, and then each business has their own things. Like in our case, there are things that matter, but broadly it is customer orientation, customer success, because without the customer, you're not going to have any revenue. And then business metrics. Those are the two. Investor metrics, we don't really have to worry about that right now.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I'm sure it's with all of the things that are changing in the ed tech space, or just broadly in the tech industry, it can be very tricky to continue to figure out how to keep evolving the needs, because your customers' needs are changing. So, like you said,
Correct.
when AI, machine learning was sort of, you were hearing that a lot, you got and jumped on that. So how do you, other than like that example, how do you think about like this whole changing tech industry landscape as well as the education tech landscape in the context of Interview Kickstart?
It's hard. I mean, like honestly, that's how you earn your stripes, right? As founders, as business leaders, you have to realize that it is hard, and so you have to give it the respect that it deserves. You can't be flippant and say, "Oh, it's very easy. We'll figure it out." No, it's very hard. I mean, like, there are nights you're going to have sleepless nights. You're going to get up, wondering what on earth are you doing. My day moves between delirium and despair every day, right? And we choose to be in this market, right? So we choose to be in this position. And I'm a tennis player, right? Like you mentioned, and there's a saying by Billie Jean King where she said, "Pressure is a privilege," and we are lucky to have this privilege to be in a position where we have to think about these things, right? So I think first thing is to realize that these things happen. They're very difficult, and you have to be grateful that you are in a position where you are worrying about this versus other people who are worrying about where am I going to get my next meal, or how do I survive the fires, right? Those are far more challenging things to worry about. Having said that, I think the changes are playing out in multiple dimensions, right? So overall, one of the overarching themes that we are developing, Priyanka, and I have to give credit to Soham because we've been both developing this, but I think he talks about it a lot more. Is across the board, one of the ways to understand the world is to think about the world as being polarized. Increasingly, everywhere, the middle layer is disappearing, right? Whether it is, income disparity is a great way to look at it, right? The rich are getting really rich. And then, there is less of a middle class and many people are becoming more poor. And, the COVID was a period where a lot of this happened. But you're seeing this kind of everywhere, right? And so I think after GPT came about, you're seeing this play out extensively in education. Okay. And the way it's playing out in education is if you were providing very thin layer over and above YouTube, that YouTube is the world's biggest education platform, then GPT is going to disrupt you massively. Okay. And that's what's happening to Chegg and some of the other public tech companies, which have kind of it's been brutal. However, you then have the other extreme, which is kind of where we fall. which is if you are providing a thick layer on top, and in our case, the thick layer is, three C's: curriculum capital, coaching capital, community and classes capital. There's a lot that goes into that. Because we are teaching advanced skills, the layer has to be very thick. GPT is not going to help you get into FANG, right? You can't just go there and you have to learn from people who are at these top companies. You have to be in that community. You have to experience it. You have to put in time. You have to show up. And so it's a thick layer. That is very difficult to disintermediate, right? Because we've kind of built then, to take the AI, lingua franca right now, we have built that workflow. If you just build a wrapper on top of GPT, that other businesses makes no sense. But if you build a workflow on top, there's a lot of value, right? So I think that's what's happening in edtech at the meta level. GPT is kind of creating a barbell, thin layers getting moved out, thick layers seeing more and more value, right? That's one thing that's, I think, playing out on the ed side. However, over time, what I've realized is that we are not really an ed company. And I think that is one of the keys to our success. We're a platform, right? And we are a platform on which multiple things can be built, right? So as an example, when we started, we only did algorithms and system design. We had a bunch of instructors, we had students or learners. On top of that, which was an early day community, we then added 19 domains. We used the same instructors and we had the same type of students come back. That became the second thing that was built on top of this. Then we added AI. Now we have specialized AI, right? And so in effect, we have a community and a platform of people on which we can build multiple businesses. Tomorrow, we will build B2B, which is what we're starting to do now. After that, we might build insurance, right? I'm just making up stuff, right? But essentially, that is not how a traditional ed company thinks, right? So we think of ourselves really as a community and a platform for people who want to get to top companies or work at top companies. And we keep building stuff on top of this engine. Right. So as more people come to the engine, we get to build more, and then more people come, we get to build more, right? And so I think, we think of ourselves as a community and a platform that just happens to be dealing with education at this point of time.
Right. I guess that also makes, being a platform also helps you scale the way you have and the way you will in the future. I'm sure as you think about B2B, that just opens up so much scale and so many different opportunities for your platform. So I think that's really a great way to think about it, because
and on the instructor side, Priyanka, we are a managed marketplace. Like it's actually run as a managed marketplace, right? So it is a overall, right, there are some very interesting elements that have gone into the platform, and you're 100% right. As we move into B2B, that just opens a completely new, what they call TAM or SAM, these interesting acronyms with basically opportunities to build.
Right. Wonderful. Well, I, could go on and on asking you a whole bunch of questions. But as we kind of try and wrap this up, what trends or opportunities are you most excited about? And how do you see them shaping the future of your industry?
Sorry, just to clarify, trends around potential business opportunities for people, or trends around tech? When you say trends, just like what sort
that
of
would be relevant to you in terms of trends in the tech industry, trends in the education industry, or the platform-based industry, or just startups?
I think, okay, so, startups is a passion of mine. So I will definitely pick on, I'll definitely talk about something there. I absolutely love startups. I think they're they're everything that has ever been done or ever been built started off as a startup, right? So the first person to make bread was a startup that made bread, right? And so I would say, let me pick three key trends that I see. Obviously, the big one is AI. We are in the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of AI. It's unbelievable how much the rate of change of AI and rate of change is what matters in technology, right? Vinod Khosla has written a lot about this. It's unbelievable how fast this stuff is changing. I'm sure that there are all of these conversations about scaling laws and training and time inference, etc., which I won't get into. It's not an area of strength for me. But I think AI is fundamentally redefining everything and every business. I lived through this when I was running the e-commerce company, because internet existed, but that was the shift to mobile. And while I think we are seeing a lot of really interesting businesses on AI, if you look at mobile, the really valuable businesses that were built on top of mobile were things like Uber and Airbnb. They came 4 or 5 years later, right? And so I'm very excited to see what those are. And I hope we end up building some of those, right? So AI, I think, is the first seminal trend. One must spend time just having fun with AI and understanding how it works. I mean, some of the things that we have done in the business with AI are incredible. You could never imagine that you would be able to do such fun stuff. So anybody who's anybody right now, you have to spend some time understanding AI, right? That's the first, I think, really, really big trend that I see. I think on the startup side, since we mentioned startups, it's a very interesting time to be thinking about startups, because I think that there is a really big open question out there on startups in the startup ecosystem. And that question is this: is the current model of building and scaling a startup fundamentally changing? The model that we have seen on startups at an overall level is somebody starts a startup, they get to some scale, they need to hire many, many more people. Therefore, they need a lot of venture capital. They hire more people, they grow, they need more venture capital, and this keeps going on, right? As a result of AI, one has to seriously question this. Can you now start thinking of a 5-person scaled startup, or at an extreme, a 1% scale startup? One may be an extreme, but 5, 10, 15, 20 with some agents. That startup may not require as much money to scale. And so startups could scale. And this is a question, right? This is something that I've also been thinking about. I don't have an answer. But what happens to venture capital then? Right? Does venture capital as an industry fundamentally need to rethink? Yes, there will be companies, the foundation models, all of that, which will require a lot of capital. But it does seem to me that we are entering a phase now where one could get to some serious scale with very little venture money. And so then what happens to all the funds who've raised a lot of money? So I think the venture business itself is going to find its day of reckoning, self-made, because they have funded a lot of this stuff, right? And the third thing that I would talk about is, where do the likely winners look like emerging right now? I don't have an absolute answer, but I have a hypothesis. I think different technology trends lend themselves historically to either incumbents winning or startups winning. The internet lent itself to startups winning. You look at the big players that won in internet. Amazon beat Barnes and Nobles, right? Google beat the Yellow Pages, right? And so fundamentally new businesses, because the very the very fundamentals on which traditional business was built got flipped in an internet era.
Right.
And so the incumbents could not do this because of the innovator's dilemma, right? Even Nokia lost to an Apple or BlackBerry, then Apple, Android. In mobile, the flip happened. Many of the incumbents were able to latch on to mobile, most famously Google and Apple and Meta. But there were a lot of incredible large startups,
right?
Uber, Airbnb, right? So mobile, the spoils were kind of split. My hypothesis is that in AI, at least in the beginning, the spoils are going to go to the large companies. And so large companies are back, right? And in the beginning, now over time, yes, maybe 4 or 5 years, you'll find these others. And the reason I say this is I've coined this, like there's this 3D framework. I think you need 3Ds to dominate in an AI first world. You need data, large companies sitting on all the data. You need distribution, large companies sitting on distribution. Most importantly, you need dough, cash, money, GPUs.
Yeah.
Companies are sitting on large amounts of cash, right? And this technology is changing so fast, Priyanka, that people who are building wrappers are getting constantly moved out, right? Because these foundation models are developing so fast. We forget that when the iPhone was launched, there are many people who made money selling alarm apps. That just became part of the OS, right? So I think these are the three things that I'm seeing play out, all threaded through AI. AI is the meta theme, the meta wave that's changing everything that we do. That meta wave looks like it is playing out fundamentally with large companies benefiting in the interim. At least for the next 1 or 2 years, it looks like that is the case. I mean, I'll tell you a crazy stat. Apart from NVIDIA and OpenAI, one of the companies that has made the most money from AI is Accenture through consulting, right? 200 million or something like that. I'm ex-Accenture, so I track the stock. AI is a meta theme. Large companies look like they are benefiting in the foreseeable future. And the entire venture and startup ecosystem looks like it is going to get fundamentally upended.
Yeah.
How? I don't know. If I did, I would take in our interview kickstart, capabilities and start investing there. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Iterate, stay close to the customer, be humble, and hope we get lucky and then double down on it.
Yeah.
But those are the three, I would say those are the three big trends that I see.
That's really insightful. I feel like basically you have to be ready for a massive change. And there's just going to be a fundamental change on how we do things, probably, or how we think about just maybe running a business or even just doing our work. I mean, I think there is the concept of, you talked about the one person company or one person scale company, but I believe there was like this term, I don't know if it was Sam Altman who used that, like the $1 billion one person company or something like that.
I think it's called the $1 billion the one person unicorn.
Yeah.
I think that's an extreme, but I think directionally,
who knows? Yeah.
Who knows?
And we talk about like how venture funding or what VCs will end up doing if that happens. But it also leads to this question, which is, what about people? What are the people doing then? And I was having this conversation with Sandeep, is, do we get, I mean, I don't know, we do not have to solve this at all, but like, is universal income a thing? What do people do when AI can do a lot more things that they were doing in the past? So just,
we've seen some of this play out. Like, when one of the things, if you look at history, there are two clear patterns that come out of history when you see stuff like this, right? So pre-industrial revolution, one of the most common jobs was the street lamp lighter. Somebody would go and light the street lamps every evening. When the industrial revolution came, there was no need for a street lamp lighter, right? And so what happened to those people, right? Everybody says, yes, they will have to reskill, upskill, blah, blah, blah. And that is true. Humans invariably find more and more interesting ways, and we get to more and more. The trend of technology over time has been less labor intensive and more intellectually intensive work is what humans have gravitated towards. But there is always a generation, the transition generation, which gets affected significantly, right? So while, now we look back and we say, hey, the lamplighters transformed to software engineers, that was over a 100-year period. There was a 10, 20-year period where the lamplighters struggled.
Yeah.
And to what you were saying earlier, one has to be all three things. You have to be ready, willing, and able. And maybe I'll end with this. You need to be ready for the fact that AI is going to change every job. You have to be willing to accept that you need to change in this ecosystem, and you need to get yourself enabled by doing an IK course or some other offering, so that you are ready. You want to be, the wave is coming, it's a tsunami, it's not a tidal wave, it's a tsunami. You want to be placed so that you are surfing that wave and not getting washed away by it. And there is a limited amount of time. Like, it's probably the next year to two that you can really kind of build the skills. The good part is there's such a huge shortage of talent in this place that anybody who goes to a platform like IK, does an AI course, or goes to another platform and does an AI course, or gets an advanced gets advanced skill sets on core software engineering, which is also being hired like crazy. You stand to gain a lot. Yeah. So ready, willing, able. That's what you got to be.
That's a great piece of advice for anybody who's thinking about what to do and how to kind of face the next 2, 3, 5 years, maybe. So that is wonderful. I have one final question for you, which is,
keep them coming.
Yeah, which is, say you're at this journey of starting a startup or scaling it, and I give you $100 to put it on 3 parts of what can make a startup successful: strategy, execution, and leadership. How would you split up those $100 across those 3 things?
On a lighter note, if you gave me only $100, I better be running an AI-enabled company, because you need a lot more than that to run a company.
I'm not, it's not investment yet.
But but if you so strategy, execution, and what was the third?
Leadership.
So I'm going to do a cop out. I don't think there is a right answer, Priyanka. I think it changes depending on where you are in your life cycle. So early on, you have to focus a lot on execution, because you learn by being in the arena. You have to fight in the arena for you to be able to figure out, what weapon do I need? Is this even the right arena to fight in? Right? That's actually, when you're building a startup, I've realized in hindsight, that is the most important question. And people say it in different ways. What arena do you want to fight in? What boat do you want to be on? Basically, is this the right market? Markets outdo teams 100 to 1. So in the early days, I think I would put the $100 on executing in the arena, because the question I'm asking myself, the first question I'm asking myself is this even the right arena to play in? And if so, what are the tools I need? Like, those questions I want to answer very soon, otherwise I waste my time. Periodically, from time to time, once I have got the business going and I'm at a slightly larger scale, then I would put that money towards strategy, because now I need to outcompete, think about how to acquire customers, how to scale. And as soon as I start scaling, I would put that money on leadership, because you cannot scale by yourself. Mm-hmm. And then, so there is, it's a cycle. So effectively they are constantly passing that $100 around. And once you build leadership, then again you need to execute, and then again you need to kind of go into strategy periodically. And so that's, I'm not sure if that's the answer you're looking for, but I think that's how I would do it, based on what I have learned. I don't think there's a correct answer. I mean, the fun way to answer the question. The fun way to answer that question is to say that I take the $100, go to Vegas, hopefully get it to $1,000 and then I can do all three. But that's not what I would recommend to anybody.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah, but yeah, it was, your perspective is really helpful, because yeah, there isn't meant to be a right or wrong answer here. Just understanding kind of how you think about it, and you're right. At different stages of a company, you need to focus on different things, and so I think that's goes back to speaking of just evolving yourself constantly to match what is needed in order to have the best outcome possible. So
Yeah, in a way, as a founder, if you are doing things right, every day you are rising to your level of incompetence, getting smarter, and the next day rising to your next level of incompetence, getting smarter, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I agree with you.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for this wonderful conversation. It was incredible to hear you share so many interesting insights and a lot of good advice. And I really had a lot of fun. So thank you
So
again.
did I.
Yeah.
My pleasure, Priyanka. Thank you very much. I really appreciated being here. Please, the point was not to give advice, just share my experience. And if it did come across as advice, please take everything with like a boatload of salt, because it's all content specific. But I'm very happy to help, and so please reach out to me if I can help in any other way. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, with a little grain of salt and lots of butter, maybe.
Yeah, with a lot of that's right. That's right. Awesome. Thank you
Thank
very much.
you. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or challenged your perspective, I'd love to hear from you. I work with tech leaders and founders to tackle complex challenges, whether it's scaling teams, making high-stakes decisions, or turning ambitious ideas into reality. If that sounds like something you are navigating, let's connect. Reach out via my website, thepriyankashinde.com, or find me on LinkedIn.